Hi, all. This week we're talking about digital technologies and their impact on technical communication. We want to avoid trying to be too specific about technologies that we might use right now because, as you know, digital technologies in particular are evolving at an extremely fast pace. So to just focus on learning one technology is not necessarily going to benefit you in the future. Instead, we want to think about the ways in which technology or technologies matter for technical writing. So, evolving technologies influence how individuals produce and disseminate information in and from their workplaces, affecting every phase of the problem solving approach. So, I'll talk a little bit about some specific technologies and some trends we see, but I want to focus more generally on the ways in which we need to make sure we're thinking about technology in relation to technical writing, so that when you encounter any kind of new technology, and you will need to learn those skills as a technical writer, as they apply to your particular job or workplace, but to be able to kind of adapt to different technologies as a writer as your workplace evolves. So here are some general tech trends in tech writing. Some of them we'll kind of trace back and then forward. Kind of the first big thing that happened with the evolution of digital technologies and the proliferation of the personal computer was the move or the shift from designing documents in a physical way. And if you've ever been to an old print shop, you might see, for example, typeset letters and presses to a digital design process. Beginning, of course, with simple things like word processors, which allowed you to actually print by typing or to see what a page will look like on the screen for a print document. And that kind of evolves into desktop publishing, which still allows people to do page design on a digital screen, to that whole shift where what you're producing is actually meant to be presented on the web, right? So we see that in web design tools, which moved from code, things like HTML, to what we call WYSIWYG, which is what you see is what you get. And that's that notion that you have all those kind of handy buttons and features that allow you to format without really knowing any code, right? And that way, what you see on the screen is exactly what is going to be produced when it's put onto the web or when it's printed out later. The use, of course, of templates. So a lot of workplaces now will have fixed templates and that will kind of do some of the formatting work for you, the design work for you. You're just filling in those templates with different information. Related to that is the idea of forms. Forms, in a digital sense, allow the user to just enter the relevant information, and then that is printed out automatically into a template. So you don't even have to worry about what it looks like because that's all going to be taken care of when it prints out. To then really more technical things that you might get involved with at a larger company where engaged in data processing and data analytics, like XML layouts, document types, and templates. And that's if you're more into coding, that might become part of your future work. So tied, of course, to that is the fact that print gives way to online documents. So it used to be that all your instruction manuals would come folded up or as a booklet in the things you bought, and increasingly we see links to online instructions, which might even be in the form of a video, for example. And also, though, as things moved online, we see that shift in technology from kind of the fixed desktop computer to the laptop to the tablet to now smartphones, which allow you to experience the same documents in very different ways, right? We call that device diversity. And what we need to think about is how the page we're creating for online consumption looks and feels and is interacted with differently depending on the way it's viewed, the device that we use to view it, right? We could have responsive layouts, adaptive layouts, and alternative layouts, depending on how we want to think about addressing device diversity in our design of a document and in our production and distribution of a document. Web 2.0, what we think about Web 1.0, I guess, first, to Web 2.0, Web 3.0, and the interactive audience. So we see a shift from instructive to interactive content and processes. You think about Web 1.0 is the idea of the static web page. That is the idea that when an audience views it, that it's just like viewing a print document. You can't actually interact with it, you can't edit it, you can't respond to it. It's just the information presented on the screen. And that way it's instructive. It's kind of like a textbook, right? It just sits there waiting for you to use it. Web 2.0 then allowed you to interact with people through the web more easily. And so you think about things like social networking and social media, right? So Web 2.0 allows you to create blogs, create your own videos, but in the sense of digital documents, it oftentimes at least allows you to respond to and perhaps even edit the document. Think about wikis that are built around how to do things. They're created by users, not necessarily always by experts. Web 3.0 is going to be then that shift to to not only interacting with and editing and responding to particular documents, but to actually being able to have a system that adapts to you as a user. So that becomes possible because of things like cloud computing, where we can carry our profiles not only across our own devices, but across the world. And we think about the ways in which then it shifts what our audiences need from us or expect from us as writers. So we think about it instead of just saying, here's some instructions, we can think about that as this is e-learning, right? How do we, for example, teach somebody to put together this product that we've created? Or how do we teach somebody to use this system? How do we teach somebody to do whatever we want them to do, rather than just here's a set of instructions for you to consume and figure out on your own? We think we have much more access to data than ever before, because as people use digital technologies, they leave digital footprints and profiles and cookies and all these things that allow us to understand better who our user is, right? User profile analytics, what their preferences might be, the ways in which they interact with the things we create, which allows us to adapt in different ways. Now, obviously, as a tech writer, you're not necessarily going to be doing all these things, right? But these are things that are trends in the tech world, and so there are things that we need to be aware of and that we might need to address as we move into different workplaces. Rich media content replaces long documents. Certainly, there's been much made of people's reduction in attention span because of these short videos and text messages and emails, everything being reduced into smaller pieces for easier consumption. And along with that comes that increasing reliance on visuals. Visuals and audio visual, right? Podcasts, vlogs, video blogs, right? Infographics, all these things which allow us to present the same amount of content in shorter snippets that are more easily consumed and more easily understood by our changing audiences, right? So while technical writers were traditionally tasked with only text and then asked perhaps to incorporate visuals, they're now being asked to think about different media and the ways in which they can use different media, not only to supplement, but in some cases to replace the kinds of documents that tech writers have traditionally written. If you think about a user manual for something large like a car, it's kind of like a brick. It's also something that people rarely use or rarely read, and probably never read front cover to back cover, right? So how might we, as tech writers, find better solutions for what that document looks like and that part of that discussion is thinking about medium. New business products and processes. Right, we see a shift in the digital world from physical products and services, right, things that people actually make or things that people do for you, to including now digital products and services, right? Some of you might still buy physical music like CDs or cassette tapes or albums, but more and more people are buying just the digital version of music, for example, right? It's a digital product now. There are also digital services, things that people do for you that don't actually impact your physical life, but impact your life in digital ways. As we have new products and services, we have new products and processes to document through our technical writing. We also see then a shift in the business world from what we call the product development life cycle, which is something we'll talk about this semester, and that has to do with how we design, create, advertise, sell, and evaluate products, right? Physical products that we might create and send out into the world, and how the technical writer is kind of part of that process. To this idea of enterprise software product adoption, that is, that as people use software or other digital features, that we can work as technical writers to make the user experience something that the user wants to repeat and enjoys using, finds easy and effective to use, and therefore will actually adopt whatever software your company is part of, right? It comes with all of this then a shift from the product focus, right? A technical document traditionally documented the product itself, right? Think about a set of instructions. It documents how to turn that product from pieces, for example, into a complete product. To this idea of being user focused. So rather than focusing on the product, focusing on how the user is actually going to use that product. And we see a shift in some of the lingo from tech writing to technical composition to now we have content writers is a big thing. And it's about being less technical in your technical writing because you're focused instead on the user experience, what you might see abbreviated as UX, into your documentation, right? So in some ways, just kind of a little bit of lingo there. But also that underlying concept of the shift from being purely technical in your writing to thinking about your user, and that's kind of been the center of our problem solving approach, I hope, right, so far. So how does this impact our PSA or our problem solving approach? So we think about our plan, right? Choose which technologies will best assist you and your audience in achieving your purposes. So what medium or media will the resulting document utilize, right? A lot of times we know we're creating a web page or we know we're creating a memo. We know we're, right? That drives a lot of what we do. And so which technologies can help you produce the document, right? How are we going to compose it? Are we going to compose it in Microsoft Word? Are we going to compose it in Adobe PageMaker? Or we're going to compose it in HTML? What are we good at using? What kind of technology fits what we're trying to create best? What technologies can help you distribute the document? In other words, how are you going to get that document out there? Is it still going to go in the mail? A physical thing in the mail? Is it going through email? Is it going on a web page? All these different considerations might change the way you think about technology and think about your project. What technologies can or will your audiences use to access the document, right? Are they going to access it on their smartphones? Are they going to access it as a piece of paper? How big does that print need to be? How do the illustrations need to be, right? All these things change during our planning depending on what technologies we're going to be using. What problems do these technologies solve and create, right? One of the great problems of the printed document has to do with the cost of printing and the cost of distributing physical paper, right? So if you're sending a bunch of manuals out to people, those manuals weigh a lot, and mailing costs a lot, printing costs a lot, binding costs a lot. Having digital technologies can help us solve that problem. But that creates new problems. That is, your users need to have the technology they need to access that document if it's digital, right? Do people out in the field in an oil field have internet access and devices that are built to withstand being out in a working area, so that they can access what they need, right? Are they going to be wearing gloves? Does that stop them from using that document, right? And these are a wide variety of possibilities here, and this is why it's our planning stage, right? It's a place where we think about all these potentialities and constraints that make our document what it is. Some trends you want to think about, perhaps multimodality is that idea of creating through multiple modes of creation, or sometimes multiple media, sometimes in different ways, sometimes collaboratively, right? Multimedia is, of course, using more than one medium. So is there going to be a video component, a visual component, text component, all these different components. Multi-platform, right? That's the idea of device diversity. How is this going to be printed in different ways? Does it need to look different or be different, right? It could actually be written differently depending on the platform where it will be experienced. The idea of virtual collaboration is a big push right now, obviously with the pandemic, but even before that, we saw a rise in teleworking, and this is great in many ways because it allows us to reach our experts in lots of different areas so that we can get the information we need. And interactivity. How can we think about making our documents focused on the user experience? So when the user needs, they can get, and that the system that the document we're designing is in some ways like a system that can respond to the user's needs. When you think about research, you think about the same idea, right? Choose which technologies will best assist you and your audience in achieving your purposes. So what can we find out about the product or service through our research? Who is the user through our research, right? How are we going to organize that research? Well, there are lots of digital tools for organizing research now that can make your job a lot easier. Collaboration, once again, right? That ability to get the information you need from other people much more quickly and out of kind of traditional workplaces because of the capabilities of virtual communication. So we see here trends like big data. There's a big push, right? I said there's a lot of data available out there, and there's a lot of data analytics that allow us to do things with that data. So a big trend in technical writing is using that big data to better understand our users and to better understand kind of what products and services they need and how they use those products and services. But data analytics is also a way for us to organize and process our research. And of course, the idea of virtual collaboration. When it's time to draft, you're thinking about doing the same kind of, it doesn't change drafting, it might just change where drafting takes place and what it looks like. So some people still like to hand write documents, right, and then later type them up and then later worry about what it's going to look like visually on the page or developing other kinds of media presentations that can be part of that document. But once again, you want to choose the technologies that best assist you and your audience in achieving your purposes. So when you're thinking about organizing your document, it's probably going to look very different depending on what kind of document it is and what kind of media you're using. And as you draft, are you going to draft that in a kind of traditional way, or are you going to draft it in the kind of software it's going to be used to consume it? When you think about arrangement, you're going to think about how technology allows us to view certain things, right? Viewing something on a smartphone versus viewing something on a television screen, right? That size difference means we need to arrange our information differently, thinking about those things. That is clearly connected to the issues of design, and we'll be talking about some really specific design issues in the future in this class, and particularly with the use of visuals and other media. And as always, we need to review. And we're going to talk a lot about, we'll have a section on accessibility testing and usability testing as we move forward. But technology actually gives us some tools that will help us test accessibility and usability before we even get to our first set of users, right? Where we might get feedback from people who are actual users or people who we work with. or work for, right, as we're developing documents. As always, we're going to rewrite, and redesign. And digital technologies can make this much easier, right? Gone are the days where you have to retype an entire page just because you made one error on that page, right? Now we just go back, delete that error, correct it, and move forward. But it also allows us to do huge global revision, right? Moving sections of documents around, adding visuals later, all these things that are much easier now that we have desktop publishing and digital tools. And finally, we're going to distribute that document. Now, obviously, depending on what media we used, we'll have very different considerations for distribution of that document. Distribution is something that is part of our planning process, right? So how is this going to be shared with our users is part of how we plan what that document will look like, what media we'll use, what technologies are appropriate, right? So that's just a real quick overview. And if you have any questions, please let me know. I'm here to help.